Welcome! I'm so glad everybody made it to the Wild Foraging Society meeting. We primarily talk about education about plants, and we harvest some edibles in our neighborhoods.
The mulberries that you want to eat from the tree are going to be deep, deep purple, almost black looking, closer to this one. Once you see a black one, you can reach up, give it a simple tug, and it comes down right away, right into your mouth.
To see this opportunity come up where you can pick fruit for the community and you could also have some fresh fruit for yourself, I think it's a really great initiative.
So much fruit is growing in Toronto. From our calculations, we see that it's actually 1.5 million pounds of fruit that grows on Toronto branches every year. Most of that will go to waste if there isn't a group there to be able to harvest it and put it to good use.
I feel that urban beekeeping is important because it opens up a dialogue and a conversation about bees. They are spraying pesticides on crops and fields, unfortunately. Urban rooftops in general are glorious places to be. It's ideal for beekeeping. It's sunny, it's warm. For the beekeeper, isn't it great? Look at it. It's the perfect place to be.
Hi, I'm Laura Rainsborough, founder of Not Far From the Tree. That's Toronto's very own fruit tree project where we pick fruit from backyards and share it with the community. Our aim is to pick as much fruit as we can from what's already existing in Toronto backyards and make sure that that fruit gets put to good use. So when a homeowner signs up their tree with us, we'll mobilize a team of volunteers to get out there and pick that fruit. Every time that we pick fruit, we share it all in the neighborhood. So 1/3 is offered to the homeowner, 1/3 is shared amongst the fruit pickers who come and help out that day. And then the final third we deliver to food banks, shelters, and community kitchens right there in the neighborhood.
When we moved in here, we knew there was an apple tree. When you have a fruit tree on your property, everything comes ripe all at once. It's not, it doesn't stagger it out so you could eat it over the course of a few weeks. And there's so much more than one single family or even an entire block could eat that comes ripe all at the same time. And so we just weren't sure what we would do. And our neighbor told us about Not Far From the Tree. We thought it would be perfect. So we gave them a call, and they've come actually to our tree every year for the last 5 years. And they really know what they're doing. I mean, it's always been kind of amazing to me because if you look at the tree, it's a pretty feral apple tree in the sense it's gotten really, really quite big, and they come with professional looking equipment that they can pick the apples that are way high up, so that's really very helpful. I'm really enjoying it so far. It's my first pick today, and we're picking this lovely apple tree. What I get out of it is the satisfaction and the knowledge that I'm picking fruit that's not going to go to waste and instead will feed the community and the homeowner and the other volunteers.
It's my first time on a pick.
Oh yeah, there's a lot up here.
And depending on how many apples I take home with me, I might either eat them all or I'm thinking of making some applesauce because I can put that away in the freezer and save it for later. It's important to me to volunteer for Not Far From the Tree because I think it takes an underused resource that's right in my neighborhood and brings it to people who need it. When you see fruits that are just like falling onto pavement and not being picked up, it really feels like an image of the city disconnect with like the nature that's all around us.
Our first pick ever was in 2008, so we've been going for several seasons strong. Now we are in not just one neighborhood, but 15 city wards across Toronto. We have over 1,000 active volunteers just waiting to get out there and harvest fruit with us this year. And we have 70 of those volunteers who are leading picks on our behalf. So they are incredibly dedicated folks out there volunteering to run this project. In total, we've picked over 75,000 pounds of fruit so far, and we can't even get to all the trees. So we have even more growing to do to be able to harvest more fruit.
At this location, we're picking pears. Sometimes homeowners are home. Today they're not, so they've left a ladder for us to use, and we get the job done, and they get a third of the harvest left on their doorstep. I am a supreme gleaner. How's that? Perfect. It is my second summer taking on that volunteer role. So what that means is that I lead a pick, so I go and pick up the cargo bike in the ward that we're picking in, bring all the equipment, get things ready for pickers who then show up to volunteer their time. We pick together and I take it to our local community partner, a third of the harvest when we're done with the pick. Yes. And I think one of them fell. There's a windfall there in the garden. When we're picking, each picker will have a bag with them. Sometimes fruit falls from the tree and it hits the ground before we can catch it. We call that windfall, and that gets put in a separate bag. And that will go home with any of the volunteer pickers. It's just so that we know it's hit the ground and that we preserve it rather than eating it raw. I love working with Not Far From the Tree and volunteering with them because it allows me to get to know my city in a different way. And it lets me get to know people in different wards. Stoppers by love to ask, what are we doing, and explore for themselves what it's like to pick, and it just gets everyone looking up in the city and seeing their city in a new way.
We'll harvest beginning in mid to late June, and it'll go all the way through to mid to late October. So it begins with sweet cherries and sour cherries. There are service berries and mulberries that come out around the same time. A little later on you get apricots and plums, and then later into the season, near the end of the summer, you get apples, crab apples, elderberries, sumac, pears. Into the fall you end up with black walnuts, quince, and a few others that come a little later.
At this home, we're picking grapes. We have green grapes and purple grapes, and both of them are heritage variety. What happens when the volunteers come is they do some picking, and then they sort the grapes where we're going to keep the edible ones, and then the other ones are going into the green bin.
The grapes were here when we first bought the house. It was a Portuguese family that owned before us, and they'd obviously had these vines for a really long time. We eat a little bit, but I'm afraid we let some of the fruit go to waste. And yet it's such a beautiful legacy thing. We didn't want to cut down the vines at all. We wanted to keep them. They provide beautiful shade.
The last time I picked fruit was when I was a kid. And to see this opportunity come up where you can pick fruit for the community and you could also have some fresh fruit for yourself, I think it's a really great initiative.
I think a lot of us that have urban fruit tend to think of it as surplus and let it go to waste if we're not careful. Personally, I have not, I'm ashamed to say, I've never put the effort into harvesting it all myself and taking it where people could use it, so it's wonderful to have an organization that can do that. And that also reminds me of just how much of our environment here in Canada, here in Toronto, is still fully engaged with nature. This isn't a concrete jungle.
There's a clear need for this because so much fruit is growing in Toronto. From our calculations, we see that it's actually 1.5 million pounds of fruit that grows on Toronto branches every year. Most of that will go to waste if there isn't a group there to be able to harvest it and put it to good use. Even the amount that can come from a single tree can be overwhelming for one household to handle. So you bring people together, you share in the harvest, and you make sure that instead of going to rot on the ground, that is healthy, great, nutritious food that gets shared by the wide community.
I feel that urban beekeeping is important because it opens up a dialogue and a conversation about bees.
We are facing a critical time for bees right now.
Over 50% of the bees worldwide have already died off, and 1 in 3 bites of food we eat every day is pollinated by bees, so we really need them.
They are spraying pesticides on crops and fields, unfortunately, and there's less of that in the city. In 2008, I worked at this hotel, and my colleague, who's the executive chef, had the idea, why don't we have an apiary here atop of the roof of the Fairmont Royal York? Now that I've taken the lid off, I'm going to go into the honey super. Here you'll find the queen excluder, and that prevents the queen from moving up into the honey because we don't want her laying in the area where we'll be harvesting the honey. So we've got 1, 2, 3 supers and one what we call a brood box, where that's where the colony is developed by the queen. We began with 3 and it developed into 6 hives. We approached the Toronto Beekeepers Cooperative for their assistance and guidance, and that's how I became a beekeeper, and to this day I'm still keeping. That's a weird one. Urban rooftops in general are glorious places to be, and if you're beekeeping on your roof, it's a lot safer. It's ideal for beekeeping. It's sunny, it's warm, your bees will winter well, they've got the heat from underneath them rising up. And for the beekeeper, isn't it great? Look at it, it's a perfect place to be. And right here is the main entranceway. This entranceway is the passage that you do not want to stand in front of. Bees will leave here in the morning at 9 a.m. and at dusk they'll come right back in. This is a very beautiful wax. Recently, the Task Force for Systemic Pesticides, there's 50 scientists involved in this, they found that pesticides are causing damage to our bees. And the research that this task force conducted clearly, unequivocally showed the impact of neonicotinoids on the health of bees.
Folks may be hearing about these neonicotinoids, or neonics for short, which are a class of persistent systemic pesticides that were introduced to agriculture just in the last 10 years.
I think the number now is something like 95% of all fields are being treated by neonic pesticides at the seed stage.
So neonicotinoids are an interesting class of pesticides. They bind to the nicotine receptors in the brains of insects, and in doing so essentially cause paralysis in the insect eye. Sublethal effects can cause problems with learning behavior. So learning is incredibly important to a honeybee colony. Honeybees need to learn where their colony is so that they can go out and forage and come back. If they can't learn where their colony is, that's kind of a loss for the colony.
Neonics have got to go!
If you don't want this to keep happening, you need to talk to your MP. You need to make sure that we ban neonics.
I wanted to demonstrate in a very clear way, because beekeepers have been speaking out in the media, and that's really helped, I think, the public understand the number of bees that we're seeing die. If we want to continue to live and have a food supply, it's imperative that we ban neonics immediately.
We now have about 1 million dead bees in the coffin. This is one of the queen bees I found from a donor, so I'll put her in last. Queen bees used to live on average for 7 years. Now we're lucky if we get a year.
So is there evidence of a decline in honeybees globally? There is, and the evidence comes from surveys within countries looking at annual mortality within beekeepers. There are 800,000 colonies across Canada. If we're losing 12 to 43% of our colonies, that's quite a substantial number of bees that are actually dying annually.
One of the reasons people should be concerned about neonicotinoids is science is beginning to point to its role in colony collapse disorder.
So colony collapse disorder is a disorder in which the adult population of a honeybee colony disappears, and as a result the whole colony collapses. It can't support itself. There are about 29 known pests and pathogens of the honeybee. One of them right now is something called a varroa mite. It seems to be a big contributor.
When people debate whether it's the mite or the neonic, we're saying the neonics may be setting the bees up and weakening them, so they're getting hit twice.
As well, we know that when doused with neonics and other chemicals in general, the honeybee immune system is affected. So it actually it reduces the ability of honeybees to fight against the 29 some pests and pathogens that it has to deal with.
99% of Ontario corn is neonic coated. So in order for that to stop having deathly effects on pollinators, including honeybees, bumblebees, solitary bees, if we want to continue to live and have a food supply, it's imperative that we ban neonics immediately. urban beekeeping could help save the bees. There's a variety of pollen and nectar sources available. Gardens, backyards, public parks like the one that we're in right now. Bees have forage, safe forage, where they're not going to be dealing with neonicotinoids. Having a rooftop apiary, if you know what you're doing, could be a good solution. However, you should spend some time with a beekeeper mentor first, at least for a season, learning what to do. Otherwise, you're going to have bee swarms all over the city.
Got a couple eggs along the edge.
We started the Urban Beekeepers series 4 years ago. I hope that the more beekeepers we train, the more protection there will be for the bees. It's always been my hope that that the practical hands-on skills that are learned in our programs is just one aspect of it, and that the other part of it is basically creating a group of educated, active, and interested bee advocates.
Now you want to scan. Like you lift it up.
Behind me are 300,000 bees. In one bee's life, it will make 1 teaspoon of honey. In one colony's life, it will pollinate thousands and thousands of plants that need their pollination services. We're at a tipping point. Now is the time to preserve their health, to ensure that bees can live strong and can pollinate our crops.
Hi, I'm Becky.
Hey, I'm Lee, and we're the co-founders of Wild Forager Society.
And we're going to show you how to forage for some wild edibles.
Like that, like that, like that. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Here, let me help you. Welcome! I'm so glad everybody made it to the Wild Foraging Society meeting. The Wild Forager Society is a group that Rebecca Lamb and I co-founded in April of 2013. We primarily talk about education about plants, and we harvest some edibles in our neighborhoods, and anyone can join. We have a website and we have a Facebook page, and all you have to do to become a member is show up to a monthly meeting.
Can anyone identify the mulberry tree?
Right here!
Right here! It's really easy to identify a mulberry tree in your neighborhood. The first step is usually checking out the ground. It's basically going to be littered with blue or red or purple spots because lots of ripe berries are going to be falling. The next indicator is looking up. Inside the tree you'll see a dark green top glossy leaf, and just behind it sometimes you'll have to move the branch to expose several different berries beneath. You'll often see 3 types of berries on a mulberry tree. Some that are just newly formed, and so they're more green or white. They're very hard and they're not ripe yet. These are definitely the mulberries that you don't want to be eating at this time. They still have certain levels of toxicity in them that can make you really, really sick. The next ones you're going to see look more pink or red, kind of like a raspberry, but they're not quite ready yet either. We're still ripening. The mulberries that you want to eat from the tree are going to be deep, deep purple, almost black looking, closer to this one. A really easy way to tell too if a mulberry is ripe is once you see a black one, you can reach up, give it a simple tug, and it comes down right away. And right into your mouth.
Whoa! What? Oh my gosh! Let's do that again! One thing about foraging is that you get the freshest meal that you could ever have because I pick right from the ground and into my mouth. This is a food that's come right from the farmers' fields of your neighborhood, and you get to be sort of the lazy farmer of just picking up what's growing and already available.
I have purple mulberry feet. I think my roommate and I are going to go back and make some sangria and maybe bake some mulberry pancakes. I think it'd be really good in pancakes.
We found some wild sorrel by the side of the road. It's got a nice lemony kick to it, so we're picking it and we're gonna add it to our sangria later.
Not bad.
I love the idea of food being all over the city, right at our fingertips, and we don't even know. It's pretty fantastic to be able to make a salad essentially for free, and it feels so great when you know it's local and real and everything as well, right?
A lot of folks wonder, how do they know what's edible and what's poisonous potentially or inedible? And there's a lot of great resources that can help you out. Field guides are a great place to start. If you're a beginner, it's also great to start by asking around in your social circle for folks who might have some experience eating edible plants. We recommend that people have a really great idea of what plant it is that before they're actually consuming it. So delicious.
There are tons of amazing places that you can forage in the city. Right now we're checking out one of our local ravine systems.
Right now it's raspberry season and we've just found some red raspberries. I wanted to take a look because this is a really dense bush that's growing in the understory of our forest, and often the raspberries are much smaller than you might find in your grocery store. So one thing that can help you identify the places to be looking are some of the sharp little brambles or thorns on the sides of the branches. And then as soon as they flower, I start to come back every few days and monitor till I see the juicy berries. You want to make sure that you're foraging the right plant at the right season. Somebody once explained to me that I found to be a helpful tool to think about where the plant is putting its energy. Because at any given moment, the plant is growing and putting its energy towards the most delicious part. So in the early spring, you would be looking at leafy greens and small vegetables. And then as we transition into this time, we're seeing a lot of flowers. There's a lot of edible flowers. And then as the flowers start to mature, the plant's starting to put its energy into fruits and seeds. And that's what we're gonna round out the fall with. When the first frost comes, then it's a great time to also harvest the roots, because the leaves will have had all their sugars go back down into the ground to survive for winter.
Right now, wild carrot, or Queen Anne's lace, is in bloom all over the city. So you can identify this plant by the bright white umbel of flowers that it produces at the top. So another way to help identify wild carrot or Queen Anne's lace is to look in the middle of the white flowers to see if you see a tiny, tiny purple or a black flower right in the middle. That helps you distinguish wild carrot between a very poisonous lookalike called water hemlock. This wild carrot isn't quite ready to eat the root yet, as traditionally you would eat a carrot. That's more of the fall. But now you can enjoy the blossoms and come back once they have turned into seeds. Those seeds you can dry and utilize as a substitute for caraway in lots of conventional recipes.
This is staghorn sumac here, one of our delicious native berries. These are just about ripe. When they turn fully red, you can make a really delicious drink with them, known to a lot of folks as sumacade, which is a really tart sort of lemonade drink. You can ice it and drink it all summer. It's really refreshing.
So here we have an incredibly popular plant called garlic mustard. Garlic mustard is actually an invasive species. So this means when you're foraging, you can take as much as you like. So eating garlic mustard, which tastes about how it sounds, a mustardy, kind of on the nose, and a little bit of garlic flavor. So think about making pesto or putting it in a stir fry. And garlic mustard is so simple to forage, you can pick it and add it straight into a salad. When you're harvesting the garlic mustard, try to look for leaves that are smaller. You want the younger plant so that it's less bitter and more delicious.
Here I see some of stinging nettle, one of my favorite plants. This plant is a really delicious edible you can use all season, but you really have to watch out for some of its tiny stinging hairs that it has all over the plant. So I always generally bring a pair of clippers or something like that where I can hold the plant, and then I cut it up and use it like spinach or make it into tea. It's one of the most delicious ones you can find.
So we've come across here one of my favorite wild edibles and most prevalent in the city, it's dandelion. So right now it looks like a bunch of leaves. And dandelion leaves are very edible, they're delicious and nutritious. The best time for you to be foraging dandelion leaves is the first thing in the spring, Try to get them before the plant goes to flower. That's when they're most delicious. And there you have it. You don't have to be an expert to know how to forage amazing, delicious wild food right here in the city.
Just remember, don't you put it in your mouth till you ask someone you love.